Professor Bakshi, Ms. Miller, Ms. Bakshi, other guests on the dais, and ladies and gentlemen. Let me thank AmityUniversity for giving me this opportunity to be here for this interesting workshop on how to teach English, how to teach English better. And before I say anything further, I must admit that I was quite hesitant to accept the invitation. Primarily because it's not easy to speak in front of teachers of English. I hope I would not make too many mistakes and I will be able to communicate. Now the theme of the workshop is something which is very, very contextual today. In the context of India, I think English came along with Englishmen, and although there was very little numbers at that time, but gradually learning of English or knowing English exposed India and Indians to the best minds across the globe, to the latest thinking, particularly on science. And I think it has a contribution in developing a class of Indians who could develop arguments why India should be a separate nation. So English played a very vital role in that sense of knowledge expansion in our country. But I think it also led to what you may call a class divide. And particularly after the independence, when we got to manage our own affairs, there were people who knew English and there were people who didn't. And people who knew English were in positions of power, be it in education, be it in administration, be it in maybe economy also. So it did create a class of people who could not progress because maybe they didn't know English. You may be aware or may not be aware that even to join Indian administrative services till about 1979, one important paper was writing essay in English, which constituted or contributed 300 marks out of maybe 2,000 marks, which also created a class of administrators who had come from a milieu which was very different than the average milieu, Indian milieu, which also made service very less representative. You may be aware that this led to setting up of the Kothari Commission and re-overhaul of the Indian or civil services examination system in the country. So while there is no denying the fact that there was necessity for English to be taught well, English to be learned well, and because it could connect you to the world, but also it created these social tension, should I say, and there was a class which was apart. Things have changed since. And partly as a reaction to this very social class divide or economic divide, there was a movement against English. And particularly the part of the country where we are sitting here, I remember there was a movement that we will not teach English up to class 5th. We stopped teaching English. And because we thought that maybe if we not teach English to anybody, then the differences would go away and then ultimately there will not be a creation of a divide. Maybe also one argument was that if English is too much emphasized, then Hindi or other languages would lose their emphasis and they would stop growing. The literature would stop growing, which is also very, very worrisome. Maybe the ultimate reason was a reaction to the previous happenings where one particular class progressed in life and society and economy because of the fact that they knew English, others didn't. Whatever it is, at the end of the day, it didn't happen like that. And I remember whatever government might do and say, ultimately market forces do have a way of playing it out in the field. I remember as a part of a joint review mission of the World Bank sponsored Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, I went to two very remote villages in a district called Lakhimpur Kheri, bordering Nepal. And we visited several schools over these 2 days. We would see a very well-constructed government school where midday meal was being provided, where teachers were there, where tuition was free, where free school uniforms were distributed. But we would not find too many students there. And adjoining to that school, or maybe at some distance, there is a school which is run under a tree or maybe a ramshackle building, which is called a Montessori school. In the village, where villagers are paying to get their wards admitted to that school. We naturally went to that school and also spoke to the parents. Why are you sending your children here and not to the primary school? They may also be enrolled in the primary school, that's a different story. Because of scholarship issues and other, they may get enrolled, but ultimately they don't attend the government school, they will go to the private school, where they actually pay. And the only reason that came in a sustained manner is because of this network externality. I think second major reason why this will sustain is the explosion of internet, where still, I don't have the data, maybe experts would, that maybe substantially, disproportionately large number of papers or pages, web pages are created in English, not in other languages. So we want to learn from the net, sharing the knowledge economy, then again English becomes a must. And to that extent, both these trends, globalization, internet, would enforce the role of English as a very important skill for you to have for employment. I recently visited, I was looking after the skill development program, so I visited Andhra Pradesh very recently. And again, what they are running is a course called EWRC, English Working Knowledge Course, something like that. They would pick up students or children from remote areas of Andhra Pradesh, teach them some XYZ skill, but 30 days finishing school would be to make them understand English and maybe to speak few words, not full sentences, and that would make them employable in retail malls. So again, that comes out very clearly that even today in large number of service sectors, knowing a little bit of English is helpful. I mean, we also reap the dividend of the fact that we have a large population who speak English. In 1990s, we captured the entire BPO market in the world because we had more English-speaking persons. China lost out. I think that is the only area where still China has not been able to catch up with us. So there is need to teach English, there is need to learn English, and there is need to learn it in a manner that you can make it a skill. In that context, this workshop assumes importance. Major General Ohri pointed out a particular issue which was also bothering me, that how do you learn a language? You learn a language by conversing in it. You learn a language by reading. Basically, it's not just grammar, it's about reading. Today we have very little reading habits today, and people would not have time after TV, after maybe smartphones to spend time over reading. So that avenue is being lost. In Indian context, or maybe many contexts, English would always be taught as a foreign language. Should you insist that children should speak only in English even after class? I think that's a question. May not be feasible. So, the kind of English that we learned, we were taught, or maybe Major General Ohri learned, is changing, and as he rightly pointed out, the distortions of SMS and internet and emails are maybe corrupting the language. But then we have to also keep it in mind that we are looking at English as a means of communication, and maybe sometimes those short SMSs convey much more and communicate much more. So the question is, how do we keep a balance so that we teach English and we make our kids learn English better, learn better English, but also understand the social reality which I pointed out at the beginning of my talk, so that it creates a milieu where just it is not being done only to create a class, but as a means of, as I say, livelihood or employability. I'm sure many of these questions would be agitated before this workshop, before this gathering today, and hope some interesting solutions would emerge. I once again would like to thank you all, and for a patient hearing. Thank you very much.